All right, welcome to the newest episode of NAMI-New York State Perspectives, your program to keep you supported, connected, and inspired as we ride out this COVID-19 crisis. And today we're in for a treat because we have a really special guest. You know, a lot of the great work that NAMI-New York State's able to do is because we've been able to rely on the talents of incredible interns who bring so much energy and passion to our work. And today, we're actually joined by one of our interns, my intern from this semester, Haley Amering. Did I pronounce your last name right, Haley? I'm sorry.
Haley Amering.
Amering.
It's like you almost flipped them a little bit.
All right, I'm sorry about that, Haley.
Okay.
Well, welcome. It's great to see you. It's been a couple of weeks. Haley used to always come in on Fridays. We're recording this episode on a Friday, so.
Very symbolic.
Yeah, very symbolic. So it's great to see you. It's been like, I don't know, 5 weeks since.
Has it actually been that long?
It's so.
It just time just has like morphed into like one, just like I don't even know how to describe it. Time is not a thing right now. But it's been a while, yeah.
Yeah, too long, and we'll settle on that. And you know, for anyone who participated in this year's legislative day, thank Haley over here because she worked so hard. She called probably, you know, half of the offices in the New York State Legislature to make appointments. A lot. She stuffed all the packets. I mean, we couldn't have done this without you. So thank you so much for all the hard work you've put in for us. So Haley is a psychology major and leadership minor at the University of Albany. And of course, like all college students right now, she's transitioned to online learning. So how's that been going?
It's interesting because you have the perspective of the students who are all obviously very overwhelmed, but then there's teachers too. There are some teachers that I have that are actually going to grad school right now who are also teaching. So it's like they have to handle being an online student and teacher trying to navigate it. So it's like you really, even more now than ever, we have to work together with our professors too to make sure everyone is on the same page. But I mean, for me personally as a student, I don't really necessarily have complaints. I think the biggest part isn't so much the online learning itself. It's more having an established schedule and like holding myself accountable for it, because it's really easy just to like sit on the couch and just not open any assignments or do anything. So I think if anything, the challenges that I've faced most have to do with like keeping myself like on a rigid schedule, because that's how I do best. Is when, you know, like I have you can relate to this, I know, when you have a schedule that you can follow and just like do work from one time to like to another. So like that's something I've used to help me get better with that, is the fact that like I know like between 9 and 5, that's when I want to like be able to sit down and do work.
Yeah, and that's become such a recurring theme in the conversations I've been having is the importance of structure and discipline as we get through this. Now, you kind of alluded to it. For people like you and I, that's even more important because, you know, as we've also discussed on this show, a hallmark of our NAMI-New York State family and community is overcoming challenges. And you're someone who's overcome a lot of challenges. You know, from the minute we first met each other and I kind of interviewed you, I was amazed by your self-confidence, but how comfortably you talked about everything you've overcome. And you are diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, which is a very difficult psychiatric disorder. It's one a lot of people misunderstood, kind of like schizophrenia. A lot of people think it's multiple personality disorder, but it's not. So can you kind of explain, you know, how that impacts you and when you were diagnosed?
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. There's so much to talk about with that. So yeah, I mean, I kind of want to start with that for people that aren't very aware of what borderline personality is. I'm going to just refer to it as BPD because it's just a mouthful to have to like, constantly say it. But, you know, when you think about personality disorders as a whole, I'll get into the negative connotation section of it later because it's a big part of it. But when you think about it, you know, something that I learned in class and just through research is differentiating what makes it a disorder and what makes it just like part of someone's personality. Well, obviously both, it has to do with someone's personality, but what makes it a disorder is how it impacts and that it does cause significant levels of distress in various parts of your life. So for BPD, it's interpersonal relationships. You know, often you see they start very like intensely from like not a very long period of time. There's a lot of like burnouts with them, emotion regulation, having troubles with mood swings. And you know, like there's a concept of splitting, things being black and white. So the example for it is like you idolize someone, or you, I don't know the word for it, it's slipping my mind right now, but it's like, yeah, you think they're the worst person in the world. You know, like there's no gray area. So for me, what I've found at the very beginning, so I'm gonna try to keep it as like concise as possible because it's just a lot, but you know, since I was like 13, I've had just like this huge layered journey with mental health, and along with that journey it comes with misdiagnosis. So for like a year and a half I was diagnosed with bipolar 1. So from when I was like 17, like early 17 until right before I was going to turn 19. And so it just got to the point I was on a lot of different medications, and like nothing was really helping, and it was confusing because I didn't understand what was going on. And at the time I didn't even know BPD was a thing. Right. Which is also why I like talking about it so much, and why I'm comfortable talking about it, is because like if more people knew about it and were aware, maybe they wouldn't have to go through things that I have. And so,
let me ask you a question. Let me just interrupt you for 1 second, Haley, because you brought up something I think I want to dig down on for 1 second before we so that struggle. So from 13 to 19, you know, a difficult period, misdiagnosis. I'm sure you were on medication that not only probably didn't help you, but probably set you back a little bit, right? And you know, we used to have on our TV show Mental Health Now, we had a football player named Keith O'Neill, who was an unrestricted free agent, made it onto the Dallas Cowboys, but he has bipolar disorder. And, you know, he talks about, you know, how hard it was to get into the NFL, but that was nothing compared to how hard it was in that just the 2-year period. I mean, when he was really acknowledging his symptoms until they figured out the proper medication for him, you know, how hard it is to go through misdiagnosis, wrong medication, that sort of thing.
Yeah, so, and to still be willing.
And to still be willing. So that's such a perseverance, and it takes such fortitude. So can you apply some of the lessons you've learned during what must have been that very difficult 6-year period, and how you're using it to our current situation?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a lot of it is accepting what you're going through and not trying to like, because you can't undo what has already been done, in a sense. Like things that have happened in the past, I can't go back and change them. So it's more you know, there's this concept of radical acceptance, which is very commonly used in dialectical behavioral therapy, which is commonly used to help treat borderline personality disorder. But it's you know, accepting where I'm at. So that's like just a skill that I've used a lot, like throughout my whole journey with mental health, even prior to having a diagnosis of BPD, you know, is I've always kind of seen it. My mindset has always just like, I have no choice but to just push forward. Like I'm not going to be able to get to where I want to be, even if I don't know where it is I want to be, but it's like, I know that I don't want to be where I am now. So I kind of use that in a way, and I just tell myself like, listen, it's not that I invalidate myself, you know, like I feel what I'm feeling, but at the same time, it's like, I got to be able to push through this and get to the next level of things. And I think that it ties in perfectly with what's going on currently, you know, with the whole COVID crisis, is that like, I joke around with people that like it's almost like I've been training for this moment like all along, you know, because I anticipated when I first heard that school was going to be out and that it was going to be remote learning, I was like, oh man, like how is that going to affect me? But then I thought about it more, and it's like, no, I've been like actively, you know, practicing these skills specifically for BPD for over a year now. So it's like, no, and you know, and it's proof too, because I've been doing very well since this whole thing started. So yeah, I mean, the mindset definitely is a huge part of it, and like trusting that I'm not going to be able to get to where I am, you know, without pushing forward. And then like adding on like another step too, is that like you can't necessarily experience resilience without experiencing adversity and being able to like use those negative experiences to learn something and grow from it. I think we can always learn from something.
Yeah, and definitely that's what makes the experience worth it, right? I mean, you learn more from the hard things than the easy things,
Right.
and you put it so well. It just you always amaze me with your insights and your maturity, and it's not easy to be so insightful on yourself and be so honest, and there are people who are probably twice or three times your age who have never been able to tap into that. So it's a trait of yours I really admire. I give you so much respect for that. And you're 100% right. There's so many lessons to be learned from DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy, and radical acceptance, and that, like you said, you may not be where you want to be now, but you might be at point A. We're going to get to point B, but or we'll get to point C. We might have to get to point B first, but we'll get there. And accepting
Right.
and so that's such an important thing. And I think especially now, is I know one of the things that people are really struggling with, we've discussed this, is not knowing when this is going to end, right?
Right. The uncertainty. Yeah.
Right. And for people like us who have psychiatric disorders, ours are a little different. I have ADHD, you have BPD, but we both have D's in there, so that's good. But it is that perseverance, and these are things that we know are going to last us our whole lives, and our roads are never straight and smooth. They're windy and bumpy, and
Right.
I think the way you said it, that's really, I think, given us a leg up in a lot of ways, and this is a very interesting concept.
Right. Yeah. And I think kind of just along with that too, but like one of the biggest parts of DBT is understanding that you can have like two opposing like thoughts, emotions, but like they can still coexist. Right. So like,
Especially now.
exactly. So, we have the COVID crisis, but like we also have like the possibility of doing really well. And it's like, well, how can you do well when things are happening that are so chaotic and limiting like your opportunity, I guess you could say, to do well? It's like, no, like you can have them. It's finding the gray area in such like a black and white like spectrum almost, which is like, I don't know if that's really the word for it, but like like that's kind of how it is that like you can have thoughts that are like could be seen as conflicting and opposing, but you can still find the middle ground where it doesn't affect you still.
Yeah, no, certainly. And that's such an important thing, is to really encourage people to feel your feelings right now. And you mentioned, you used the right word, validate your feelings right now. And that's also a really big DBT strategy, is validation. And especially I think something that's taught to families of people who have borderline personality disorder. And as you know, my mom has had it, and like you, misdiagnosed along the way. It wasn't until about within the last 10 years she got the diagnosis, which I think was really proper for her. But to validate what you're feeling, and you may have conflicting feelings.
Yeah.
On one hand, it's been great working from home. I really like it. It's great to be able to spend so much time with my wife. We wouldn't have had this type of time before, and I think it helps our relationship. We're learning more about each other, even after almost 10 years of marriage, and that's all great. But then, of course, you see the news, you see the people dying, and you realize, well, we're in this situation, and it's okay to feel both, and be honest with your feelings right now. And if you are overwhelmed for your feelings, know that there's help available. With NAMI's helpline is out there. We've already put out the New York State helpline. How hard was it for you for that first step in asking for help and knowing that you need help?
Well, it wasn't necessarily difficult, because I got to that point where I was like, the current diagnosis I have of bipolar doesn't feel right. So it was almost like I was seeking something different, like any explanation I could really get in order to just like feel more at ease. That was like ultimately what I wanted. I just wanted to be able to like understand what was happening more. So it's funny because I mean, like for a lot of my history, I guess you could say I've been against therapy, because obviously my experiences didn't feel fulfilling or helpful because I was being treated for something that I didn't have. And so I researched for like 3 hours. I remember one day, it was in like late December, right before I turned 19. And I was researching. I finally came in contact with someone that specialized in mood and personality disorders. And so I messaged her, we ended up meeting up, and it was actually a really good fit. And I still talk to her now. We talk every single week. And, you know, I think what's really important people have to understand too is that like therapy can't really work unless you have that good relationship with your therapist, you know. And so like I encourage people to like find that fit before you completely like wash your hands of it and swear against it, because you know, if I hadn't found the person that I'm talking to now, like I know that I would not have been able to improve as quickly or as well as I have. But that I honestly, I don't think that like going and seeking help for it was really an obstacle for me, luckily. In the past it most certainly has been, but it just kind of got, and this is such a common theme I feel like with me, it got to the point where enough was enough, and that like I knew I needed to just do something different.
Yeah, no, definitely. You know, it's so interesting too. Sometimes when you talk about like a therapist and that relationship, you know, a lot of people, I think, especially at the beginning of their recovery journey, look for ways out, right? You know, look to take for ways to give up and to say it's not for me. And sometimes you have a therapist that it doesn't work with it. I mean, it's happened with me, and I kind of relate it to dating. You know, if the relationship doesn't feel right, move on and find somebody else. Love is still a good thing. Relationships are
Right.
still a good thing. It just might not be right with this person. And I think therapy in a lot of the ways is the same way. When you finally get that one that you really click with, you know, I remember, you know, when I was struggling, when I was about your age, maybe a little, you know, and towards the end of college, I had a lot of issues going on. And, you know, I had been in therapy. You know, I was first diagnosed with my mental, I was 3.5 years old. So again, part of my problem in life was, you know, I didn't want any more therapy. I've had therapy. I've been, you know, get all these special services for as long as I can remember. You don't want to feel different anymore. And
Right.
finally, you know, when I did, I mean, I still needed help in college and found a therapist who still to this day, the best therapist I've ever had. And, you know, unfortunately moved out of there, but he was incredible. And, you know, when you were probably the next generation for me. And like when I talk about, I was so tired about feeling different. One of the things I just so admire about you is that you embrace the fact that, you know, you're different. You look to explore it. I know you're writing a book about your experience. I mean, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, it's actually, it's like I almost need to like have too much on my plate in order to feel satisfied, because like I'm working on this book project. I also started a YouTube channel like about a week ago or so at this point, and they both kind of are tying in with each other. The book, I want to focus on the fact that, you know, like the human experience is not identical for any person, you know, like it's a very subjective thing in the sense that we don't have the same thoughts, emotions, even like down to like our like coding of our genes. No one person is the same. And even like when you look at identical twins, you know, like they still have things that are different about them. And so with that, it's kind of like accepting yourself, and knowing that like you can't compare yourself and your progress in your life to someone else, because they're two different scales, you know, you can't. And so like that's kind of what I'm focusing on, and the way that I'm going to be writing it is, instead of having it be like research based in the sense how textbooks are, my research per se is my own personal experience, because you can't really talk about such a general concept that also has to do with being specific at the same time. So I can't just talk about that like vaguely. So like how I kind of want to structure it is just, you know, having like a discussion about what each section is about, what each chapter is about. Another big part of it too is that, you know, in my channel, on my YouTube channel, I talk about how there's no manual for how to navigate being a human. And for me, I've like still felt as though every single person that I have like met and formed any type of relationship with kind of needs this manual and understanding who I am. So I'm using like, you know, all these concepts, tying them in to chapters that are like different parts of the manual for things that like you need to know. So I don't know. I just I started that project back last June, I think, right before I transferred to Albany. And that's kind of like along the lines of what I'm doing with my YouTube channel too. Is basically, you know, I've always just had the passion to want people to feel included and validated and helping them get better. And I think utilizing, again, coming along with the theme of acceptance, like, okay, this is who I am. So like, why not take advantage of the qualities I have in like the process of also helping people and like raising awareness.
Oh my God, it's like, that's like at the heart of the NAMI mission. And I think I've talked to you about this, I think the most powerful thing we do as NAMI members is we've taken our own painful experiences and have learned to use them as a gift because they can help other people. So, that kind of, it validates us in a different way where it validates our experiences. Like you said before, this was all not for nothing. I might have had these very painful, difficult experiences, but I got through them. I'm better for it. And now I can use it to help other people. And that's really what we're trying to do here with this show is, we know people are struggling right now. I know people are having a hard time, dealing with this, and hearing from people like you who have overcome challenges and have such an amazing attitude and such an insight on it, I think is just so helpful. So thank you for all your insight. So I want to dig down on something else you mentioned, because you have so many interesting parts of your story. I could do like a week worth of episodes on you, but you did mention transferring from Albany. So you are a psychology major and a leadership minor. We even want to discuss leadership minor because I think that's so cool. But before, you were in a totally different world, a world that I also really admire. So before you were at Albany, you were at the Berklee School of Music, where, from my understanding, you're a very talented percussionist and drummer. So can you talk
Yes, one could say that.
Well, hey, you got to Berklee, which is pretty impressive, It's like, for those who don't know, it's like the creme de la creme of music schools. It's the best in Boston. And so can you talk about a little bit about your journey, how your love of music, is drum and psych therapy, and how you decided that it wasn't, while it's something that you love and something that you're passionate about, it wasn't the right place for you, and how you kind of took the next steps in your journey.
Yeah. Well, there's like kind of when you were just talking about all that, there was a quote that came to mind, and honestly, I may be paraphrasing when I talk about it, but it was, if you love what you do, like, you won't work a day in your life. And so I was at Berklee. So I graduated high school a year early because I wanted to get a head start on my career, which I thought at the time was going to be drum set performance. And I got there when I was 17. I moved to Boston. I'm from Rochester, so a complete like different area. I'd only ever lived with family in Rochester, so I was living on my own. And for the most part, like I have a great experience at Boston, no complaints there. It was just, I got to a point after my my first full year where I had gotten really depressed. And this was before I was diagnosed with borderline too, just for that as a reference. And I was just like, I remember sitting in the summertime just thinking, like, I had failed one of my classes that I had to retake for that following fall semester. And I was like, I don't want to do this. Like, am I happy? I just asked myself that, like, am I happy doing what I'm doing? And I was like, I'm not. Performing is just such a delicate and like personal thing that I held very close to my heart, in the sense where it was like something I did to relieve stress, something I did to express myself, something I used to challenge myself. But the second that I realized it was starting to turn into a career and more of an obligation, like, I lost enjoyment out of it. And for a while, I like wasn't even having fun playing anymore, which is something that was just like such a huge red flag to me, because drumming was everything to me, especially back then. And so I was sitting that summer, and it was summer 2018, and I was just thinking, like, well, like, what do I like, just read, like, thinking about my values. And I knew that I wanted to help people. That's partially why I was going into performing, because I wanted to be able to have people feel connected, and give them something to be able to look forward to. And music is obviously very connecting. And I was thinking more and more, and it was funny because I was actually in the process at the time at Berklee and becoming a psychology minor. So that was kind of foreshadowing, and I didn't even realize it. And then I just decided, I was going to go to Berklee for one more year because I had a lease that I had signed for an apartment. And so I just used that entire year to get caught up with my liberal arts credits. And then my last semester, I took all psych classes. I took 4 of them while working like 40 hours a week. So I just was pushing myself and learning, and in the process of taking all these psych classes, I realized that I was meant to be doing it. And like I was doing research outside of classes just about things that piqued my interest, and that's something that I wasn't doing with music. If anything, like it felt like a burden having to sit down and like do my homework for music school. So I mean, like in short, like I learned that path just wasn't for me. Like I'm not going to say that it's like no one should do it, because I mean, if it's a passion you have, go ahead and pursue it, but it just was not something for me, and it in a way didn't really line up with what I valued. But I've learned so much that the psychology major, especially the program that Albany has, which is fantastic, is just like such a better way for me to do what I've always wanted to do. And along with that too, the leadership minor, just like the combination of it just is fantastic there.
Right. So I also, graduated from Albany. We've discussed this, go Danes, but, we didn't have a leadership minor. It's something that I wish we did. I would love to have, taken. So can you tell a little bit? I mean,
yeah.
I think anyone who sees you, you're like a natural leader. I mean, you're that confidence in yourself that's really remarkable. I think that's always the importance of a good leader, as well as I think one of the most important factors of a good leader is knowing when the course isn't right and to readjust. And like you just mentioned it, right? You knew the course that you were on wasn't right. Some people would stay on that course, even though knowing it's not right, it's painful, but you're afraid to make that decision and admit that it's not right and admit that you might have been wrong. Like,
that was the hardest part about it.
Yeah. So, and that really is the sign of a good leader, to know that things aren't going right and not to be afraid to make a change. So again, you're so ahead of the curve. But can you talk a little bit what a leadership minor is, or what type of stuff you're learning there?
It's really cool. I remember when I was learning about that I needed a minor for my major, I was looking at all the choices, and as soon as I saw leadership, I was like, that's a minor? Like I had never heard of that before. So it's my second semester at Albany. I think I've taken like 3 classes now. A lot of what we focus on, a really cool concept is that leaders, like, it doesn't mean that you're at the top of something. And actually the mission of leadership is partially being able to connect people and give people direction, in the sense that we can still all work together as a team. There's a term called followership, and like being a follower. And that's something that's popped up in all my leadership classes up to this point, where it's like, it's being a follower of someone, like, does not mean that you're underneath them. And it also doesn't, like, it has a very negative connotation. People think being a follower means like you're doing mindless things and just following someone else do something. But actually being a follower, like, in order to be, in my opinion, an effective leader, you also have to be an effective follower, because followers are able to listen. They're able to, take direction, work together, bring up, if they have an effective leader, that is. This is all like hypothetically, if it's like effective, they're able to voice their opinions, and have a say in things. When you're a leader, you have to, it's something else I learned, you have to be a good listener. And that doesn't just mean being quiet when someone's talking. That's not letting your thoughts like preoccupy what you're going to say next, giving them visual cues and like reflecting that you hear what they're saying. I think that's a huge part of leadership that people often lose sight of. And honestly, just being better at communicating, I think it's something that people don't really think a lot of. But yeah, that's a lot of what we focus on. And I think it's just like, it's such a perfect pairing for what I want to do ultimately, because I want to be able to talk with people, to be able to like host clinics, give speeches, and just like, again, like just be able to talk with people. And I just like, this is the best possible combination, in my opinion, of a major and minor.
That's awesome. So I'm just wondering, as we talk about leadership and listening, and you're so right. I think most times in a conversation, I'm guilty of this a lot. I think it's an ADHD thing, is you're not really listening to the person. You're waiting for what you want to say, and you can say whatever you want to say, despite whatever the other person's saying. But as I was listening to you, one of the things that popped into my head that was so interesting is, how did your experience as a music major, especially at Berkeley, like that's such a big part of music, and I love improvisational music, jazz music, and how much of it's all listening to that other player and deciding who's going to lead right now. And do you think that's giving you, being a being so attuned to music and the level of musicianship that you have, has that helped your leadership, you think?
Oh my God, absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, especially as a drummer too, because especially with jazz, that's something that I just played so much of at Berklee. You have to be, typically the drummer is the one that counts songs off. So you have to be able to do it confidently. There's a lot of times where the drummer gives a cue to end a song. You have to do that confidently, because if, you kind of give like not a very good cue and you lean in a little bit, but aren't really looking at anyone, like they don't know when to end. So it's, being able to be like on the money with that. But also, it's a great point you bring up. Like, you do have to be able to listen to people, because how I see it is that music is just another way of communicating. And so like, if you and I are having a conversation and we're talking about mental health here, and then I come back and I reply to something you say with like talking about something my dog did, it's like, you're not really listening. So it's like, in order to have a cohesive conversation, you have to listen to what that person's saying and like reflect it in a way where you're embellishing and you're not saying the same thing. So that's something, yeah, for sure, that I learned at Berklee, that I definitely have been able to transfer to the leadership and psychology, roles too.
Well, that's awesome. So we're running out of time, unfortunately. So I want to transition to our final segment, where we do some media recommendations. And I know we talked about fear, and when we emailed before, I know you had a media recommendation that I was like, oh, it's so funny you brought that up. But I do want to dig into this a little bit. So go ahead and make your media recommendation and why you're recommending it.
So my media recommendation is my all-time favorite book, Tuesdays with Morrie by Mitch Albom. I think that's how you say his name.
Yeah.
It's actually a book that like I give out as gifts to a lot of people. I've given it out like 7 times at this point, because it's just such a great book. So basically, for anyone that doesn't know the book, I mean, you could always look this up online and figure it out, but it's between the relationship between a student and his college
mentor.
Professor. Yeah, he was a sociology professor. But long story short, he comes back in contact with him like over 20 years later and finds out that his mentor has ALS. It's just like the lessons, I think, definitely can be applied to everyday life, but especially now. I actually have a few quotes written down, if you don't mind.
Drop them.
Just to like pitch this book even more, because I think everyone should read it at least once. So one of my favorites is, as you grow, you learn more. If you stayed as ignorant as you were at 22, you'd always be 22. So that kind of goes along with what we were talking about too, like being able to accept when how things are going, that you can't change them, and that allows you to grow. And then another one that I liked a lot is the truth is, once you learn how to die, you learn how to live. So it's kind of like being able to be grateful for things while you're still alive, than to get to the end of your life and ask yourself what if, and reflect in that way. So it's my favorite book, to say the least. Everyone should read it, and that is my recommendation.
So I'm gonna jump in and say why I thought it was funny when you recommended it. My wife has been telling me to read that book for years. I mean, since we first started dating, we started dating in 2008. She's been telling me that long. I need to read this book. I have, as I told you in an email, a somewhat irrational fear of ALS. I know what it's based in. When I was very young, we had a close family friend, and their daughter used to babysit me, Mary Beth, and she had a boyfriend, husband, Big Tom. He was a New York City police officer. When I was little, I looked up to him so much. He was like almost like a big brother, and he was, like I said, called him Big Tom, and he came down with ALS, and watching what happened to him, I think, like, it's just talking about him, I think really left a scar on me, and it's something I have such a fear that I might get ALS. It's totally irrational. I mean,
I wouldn't say it's irrational.
But as you were saying, you can't let you live your life as fears. And I think that last quote really hit it home about, we're all going to die. We all have an expiration date. We don't know what it is, kind of like this current situation. And you can't dictate your life from fear. So now I'm excited to read it, and I am going to check back with you, and my wife will probably thank you too. So I have a special media recommendation for you.
Okay.
So Haley, as you know, you're actually my second favorite drummer from Rochester, and I know you know who my favorite is, because I think it's yours as well.
Steve Gadd.
Steve Gadd, yes. Can you see the graphic I just put up?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I just want to talk about 2 of my favorite drummers and recommend 2 albums that they're on. So as Haley and I have said, we're both tremendous fans of Steve Gadd, who's there, you see him on the left, who's played with everyone from Paul McCartney, Eric Clapton, Herbie Hancock. He's amazing and from Rochester, but he's on one of my favorite albums of all time, Asia by Steely Dan. Are you familiar with that album?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, and you know, Steve only plays on the title track on it. He only plays on Asia, but like I've read that like Drum Magazine said that's like the quintessential Steve Gadd drumming performance is what you hear in Asia. That, you know, especially that middle part and the end part, the way he takes the song out, is just like ultimate Steve Gadd. So can't recommend that enough. And Asia also has like one of my favorite songs of all time, Peg, which I just think is like the perfect song. And then I wanted to also recommend another drummer I love. I know you and I have discussed him. He's also a Berkeley alum, comes from Berkeley as well. And that's Vinnie Colaiuta. And incredible drummers, played again with everybody here, from Frank Zappa to with Sting for a long time, Jeff Beck, and to kind of give it a New York feel and a little added twist. I want to recommend the Frank Zappa album Buffalo, which features both Vinnie Colaiuta and also Steve Vai, who's also a Berkeley musician. So I just look at your names like Vinnie Colaiuta and Steve Vai. If you didn't know what Berkeley was, you get the idea. But I just love the lineup of musicians on that album are just mind-blowing. You ever heard that one, Haley?
Yeah, I have. Yeah.
So just if people want to know my favorite tracks, I think the ones that really you can really hear the magic of Vinnie Colaiuta so much are Andy and City of Tiny Lights. And if people don't know Zappa, they're missing out. So those are my media recommendations from you. But again, you're already ahead of the curve. So, you know, although you're my intern, or were my intern, are you technically my intern? So I don't know. But
not really sure.
I think sometimes I've learned more from you than you have from me. But, you know, I'm glad again, you're wise beyond your years. Your insight and outlook are just remarkable. And I really think a lot of people are going to learn a lot from you, and not just in listening to this show, but you have a very bright future ahead of you, and you're gonna make a difference in this world. And it's been such a pleasure working with you and learning from each other. So thank you for being with us today. Thank you for all that you've done for NAMI New York State, for helping. I mean, we couldn't have had this incredible advocacy day. And by the way, all our big budget asks made it into the budget, even though it's all this COVID-19 crisis. We still had a budget to get together, and people still had to advocate, and we did, and that was inspiration.
That's awesome.
And you were a big part of that. You know, you were the backbeat, right? Just like you would be on drums. You were the one holding it down.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Definitely, and we will talk to you soon. And we will see you next time on the next episode of NAMI New York State Perspectives. Stay well and stay connected and stay inspired.